All right. Well, we'll go ahead and kick this thing off. Just hello and welcome to the first installment of the Interlaced webinar series focused on strategies to help scale your startup. I'm Mallory Randall, and with me today, I have our CEO, Jeff Gaines, who will be taking us through strategies to scale through technology. Before we get started today, I wanted to just go over a few housekeeping items with you all. We welcome and we really encourage you to ask as many questions as possible. So if you have one as we go, please pop that into the question and answer field, and we'll make sure to cover that as we get towards the end. The session today is being recorded, and both the recording and the slide deck will be made available to you, and we'll get that emailed out later today or at the latest tomorrow. And then if you enjoy this webinar, we really encourage you to register for our next webinar that will be on Wednesday, August 14th. We'll include the registration link along with the recording. That being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Gaines. Jeff, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Mallory. Thanks, everyone, for joining. As Mallory mentioned, today's topic, scaling through technology. This is going to be the first in a series of webinars we're doing designed to help entrepreneurs, startup leaders, navigate the IT, technology, cybersecurity space as they grow. So thanks, Mallory, for helping put all this together. Really excited to be here with you all. As Mallory mentioned, my name is Jeff Gaines. I serve as the CEO of Interlaced, and with that, I have the pleasure of serving our fantastic team at Interlaced and also our fantastic clients, many of whom are startups. And so we'll talk about how we've used that body of knowledge to build this deck and this presentation today. As she also mentioned, please drop questions into the chat. I think we're going to try to address all those towards the end of the presentation, but as they come up, drop them in the chat. Mallory and team will be monitoring those. And then definitely happy to connect offline with everybody. We'll drop my LinkedIn towards the end. And if I can help in any way, always excited to do that. Cool. So with that, we can go ahead and jump in and get started. Agenda today, we'll start with a really quick overview about Interlaced, just to give you some context on why we felt compelled to share some of this information with you all. And then the meat of today's presentation, the core topic is, what are the common challenges that we have seen over our time in serving startups, the startup community, and then we're going to give you some actionable solutions and strategies to overcome them. As mentioned, we'll also give you all some leave behinds that you can take with you to help address some of these challenges. The 5 challenges we see probably most frequently: how do you make good decisions as a startup leader, a founder, entrepreneur, when your data is sort of all over the place? And we'll talk about how that happens and how to get around it. How to scale your team quickly and efficiently. Once you get to a tipping point, you need to bring on headcount. How do you do that? And how do you do that in a really effective way? How do you forecast the costs of that growth, at least from an infrastructure and technology standpoint? We can talk about that a little bit today. As time goes on, your team becomes less technical. Day-to-day productivity is going to drop when there's technical issues. We'll talk about that. And then finally, kind of hot topic of the last few years is really cybersecurity. So we'll give you some just kind of good hygiene tips here on how to address cybersecurity. So you may be asking, if you don't know who we are already, who is Interlaced? Well, quite simply, we're startup IT specialists. So we've really built our business by helping startups build scalable infrastructure, set up their team, set up their business for growth from an IT and technology standpoint. We started as a startup ourselves many years ago as a micro startup, and have since been growing. We currently have office locations in both San Diego and Nashville, from which we serve clients all over the country. And again, currently serving a few hundred startups. Over the years have served thousands. And so that's really where we built this context from. And so hopefully it's helpful for anyone that's navigating this, whatever part of the startup journey you're on today. Cool. So I think with that, we'll jump into the core topics here and talk about some of these challenges. One more time, what we see most often in the startup world is really hard to make decision when your data is in silos. Scaling your teams can be hard or difficult with disconnected processes. Forecasting the cost of growth is always something that's on founders and leaders' minds. How do you get ahead of productivity loss within your workforce and make sure that you're moving as quickly and as efficiently as possible? And then how do you package all of that up and do it in a really secure way when it comes to your intellectual property, your assets, your data? So topic one, speaking of data silos, again, we see this pretty frequently. We've experienced it ourselves over the years. As your company grows, you'll start developing fiefdoms within your different teams or even individuals. Someone prefers this tool or this system, and your data starts to proliferate there, and it may not be talking downstream to other areas of your business. So how does that present in challenges? Well, the most obvious one is it makes it really difficult to make good decisions. I've had a business mentor that told me when you get into a leadership position, you have to have really good gauges on the plane in order to fly it. And I kind of think about your data and your different systems that way as well. So being able to really understand what's going on in the business comes through your ability to interconnect your different data. It creates a digital divide between your teams and team members. So if different teams or different individuals have different insights because they have access to different information or data, it's going to be really difficult for them to collaborate and work effectively together. And then the third challenge with data silos is security and compliance issues. And so we'll talk more about this on that fifth topic, but this is an introduction to it. So we have something we call an attack surface. So that's all the vulnerabilities in your business. And if you have your data sprawled out in many different places where maybe you don't even know it's existing, obviously that can be it's increasing your attack surface for bad actors out there. So good news, we're going to offer some solutions today as well. So first up, really easy when you're getting started, be proactive and be intentional about selecting the different systems, tools, and software you're going to be using in your business. That starts with the productivity suite. So when you think about how you're handling email, how you're handling file sharing, calendars, instant messaging is huge now, or even video calls. Think about how all those things are going to work together, and then really build a system that works best for your team and getting that data back and forth. The good news is both Google and Microsoft offer a pretty robust full suite line of applications now that handle this end to end. And what we see, I think probably most commonly in the startup community is people tend to lean towards Google, but select whatever is best for you, and then really kind of think through the way all that's going to work together early on. It'll make your life much easier down the road. So that also includes thinking about what other common tools around that productivity suite you're going to need. Think about things like your CRM, your accounting system, your project management systems, whatever they might be. And this is going to help you identify things that are going to hopefully natively integrate with the areas where your core data is being stored. For example, if you're a Google business and your data is being stored in Google Drive, finding tools that are easy to move that data between Google and say like a HubSpot or a Salesforce, for example, is going to be really helpful and eliminate some of the manual work and also control some of that attack surface we talked about earlier. And then finally, on this topic, or not finally, next on the topic, diagram that out. So this is like a really simple exercise and one that I think we even neglect sometimes, at Interlace, but super helpful to get done. Sit down, pen and paper even is totally fine, and think about what your environment ideally would look like. Think about where you want to move information from point A to point B, why that would be helpful. If it needs to go back the other way, we call that bidirectional, why that might be helpful. And that'll help you draw some visualizations around the way you want to have your business run from a technology standpoint, but also just how the technology should be speaking together and how your team should be collaborating. So an example of that, just to kind of paint that picture, when we built our go-to-market function at Interlaced, we really thought about the way our marketing data would work with our sales data, would then work with our delivery team and our finance team. And so thinking about getting information and data from our quoting tool, PandaDoc, into HubSpot, our marketing and CRM tool, and then ultimately into our delivery team and the tools that they use. So making sure you have that all mapped out ahead of time will help you navigate it more intentionally. Okay, and now finally, the last solution on this topic. Think about your customers. This is a really big one. So it's not only important that the tools work internally for your business and for your different teams, and that you have a good grasp on where your data is being stored. But it's also important that you're thinking about your customers and meeting them where they're at. Think about the different tools that they're going to be using. A great example of this is at Interlaced. We know we work with startups, and so we use Slack to instant message with our customers. We use Zoom to help them with strategy and troubleshooting. And so think about what your customers are doing in whatever vertical or industry that you're serving, and best you can try to architect your environment to match that, because it's going to make collaboration externally that much easier. All right. So that was topic one. Happy to talk more on that one or any of these other topics as time goes on. I think just remembering the goal there is to create a unified ecosystem the best way that you can. Next topic, we're talking about scaling teams and some common challenges we see there. The first challenge we see, controlling access without blocking productivity. So if you're a founder, you're a solopreneur, you have access to everything in the business, your sensitive financial statements, all of your customer information, your product information. But as time goes on, you're going to hire more people, and you're probably going to want to make sure that you're protecting some of those different areas of the business. Doing that in an intentional way without slowing down those employees, without hindering their productivity, can be a real challenge, especially as you're getting started, going from employee 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and so on. So we'll talk about some solutions there. I think probably the most important challenge that we see startups struggling with is, how do you cultivate a really great day one experience that's going to help you compete with larger companies? So when you think about your recruiting, your retention mechanisms within your business for your team, oftentimes, especially in technical startups, you're competing against much larger businesses that have better brand reputation, better funding. They can give your team members access to better amenities and benefits. So I'm sure you've sold them already on your vision and what the startup's doing and what they can do for their career. But how do you actually deliver on that from day one and really forward is a huge challenge. And so obviously, if a team member starts and their first day is disorganized or underwhelming, that's going to set a really negative tone. It's going to impact their productivity initially, definitely going to probably impact their long-term satisfaction and ultimately their longevity with your business. So getting that right, I just can't stress enough how critically important that can be. The third challenge we often see is getting team members started quickly, kind of on that same vein. So you've found the perfect employee, you went through this long recruiting process, screening, interviewing, and finally got your hire started or made. That person starts, or right out of the gate, you want to give them all the tools and access information they need to be successful from day one and really hit the ground running, especially in a fast-paced startup environment. Time is like totally money. You think about your burn rate or whatever your run rate is, you really want to be getting a return on some of those key hires early and often. And that can be a challenge in the startup world as well. So we'll talk about some solutions to these three common challenges we see on scaling. Solution number one, document your roles and departments. This is more documentation, but it'll help you in the long run. It's a very simple process. We do it for all of our customers when they come on board. You can do it yourself. It's not anything novel or groundbreaking. It's just something that just can be helpful if it is done. And the way we basically recommend laying it out is to build a matrix. You can do this in an Excel spreadsheet, lay out all of your roles and departments on one axis, all of your applications, email groups, calendars, etc. in the other axis, and just where they intersect, put in some information about should they have that access, and if so, what level of access they should have. And that's going to help you really quickly navigate that first day. You're going to be able to know right away what they need to be successful in that role in their department, especially as time goes on. And obviously, like as time goes on, you'll have to update this document. We'll talk more about that. And then it also is a helpful guide for just the general operations of your business. We are surprised how often startups come to us and they're at 50, 60, 100 people even, and they've never really gone through this process. And it's so helpful for them to have us handhold this process for them, not just from like an IT and technology standpoint and licensing and SaaS tools and all this other stuff, but really just from like a business standpoint to actually see where everything lays out beyond just like a common org chart. So has a lot of use cases. One obviously is making sure that we're getting your team scaled effectively and giving a first day experience that's exceptional. So taking that document and actually assigning access to your different data, your different systems based on it, super, super important. It's going to really help with that getting started quickly. There'll be no doubt that when that person starts, they have exactly the access they need, no more or no less. They're not going to have access to any sensitive customer information that you don't want them to have. They're not going to be missing anything that they need to do their job effectively on day one. So it just kind of gives everyone a little bit of peace of mind that things are exactly where they need to be. I mentioned earlier, we definitely recommend going back through a review process of this information, this document. We like to do it either quarterly or semi-annually. Pick the pace that's best for you, but inevitably your business is going to evolve. You're going to bring on new systems, new tools. You'll have changes in the business that need to be reflected here just to keep everything accurate. And the last piece of this is it's inferred, but as important as it is to use this to assign access, it's equally, if not more important, to use it to revoke access. So your great employee has fulfilled their mission with your company. They're moving on to their next best opportunity. We're all very happy for them in that motion, but it's also very important that we have a good record of where they've had access to sensitive data, sensitive systems, et cetera, so that we can go back and effectively revoke that access on departure. And the last solution we have for you is a really simple one. Standardize on hardware options. I guess this is the last one. I did that again. Standardize on your hardware options. It's really easy. This is like a 5-minute exercise. It just takes out all the guesswork when someone starts. There's no back and forth. Notice I put options in there. This is not say pick a lane and put everybody into it. Having options is such a powerful recruiting tool. We definitely recommend that you have some options. Pick a couple Macs, pick a couple PCs, keyboard, mouse, monitor, whatever. But it makes it really easy when someone signs an offer letter, if you have a snap hire, that you can just pull those things off the shelf, wherever the shelf may be, and get them to that person really quickly. Again, thinking about that really effective first day experience, which is the last solution we're going to talk about here. How do you design an experience around day one? Really think about design thinking. So as startup founders and entrepreneurs, most of us are probably familiar with the concept of design thinking. Usually you're oriented around your customers so that your product or service is meeting them where they're at. Do the same process for your team, your employees. Put yourself in the position of a new employee at your company, or even an employee that is tenured at your company, and try to think about all of the things that they would want or desire and how you can make a phenomenal first day experience for them. That can be difficult to do. Definitely encourage you to get creative, especially if you are small, scrappy, bootstrapped. Maybe you have early round funding. You're trying to really stretch that. You have to get really creative and out of the box to think about ways you can create that first day experience that's exceptional and compete against those bigger companies that may have more resources and more funding than you do. But if you sit down and think about it and put yourself in that seat, we were all first day employees at one point in our lives. think about the things that you would have wanted there. It's going to make it much easier to deliver it. What you don't want to do is just hope things work out. So hope that first day goes well, because that's definitely not going to get you from here to there. All right. Next topic, forecasting the cost of growth. So there's a lot of cost levers within the growth cycle. We're going to focus on a few. People, obviously, like big costs on the P&L. Obviously, development, R&D, big costs on the P&L. Others, software technology, equipment, facilities. So we'll think about some of those things, how they correlate, and how you can get ahead of some of the challenges that come along with growing. So first challenge we see, cost creep. This can happen in your personal life as well. I'm sure people have heard this term. Happens in businesses. You're really focused on developing your product or service, taking care of your customers. You're not thinking about this portion of your P&L. But I can guarantee you that if you do think about it and you are proactive around cost management, you're going to have more capital, more resources to put into growing your business, into refining your product or service. And so definitely an area where we recommend putting focus. So one of the major challenges mentioned, cost creep. This is exactly what it sounds like. Gradual increases over time, not immediately noticeable. Incremental spending on new shiny software, services over time that accumulates into some significant expenses. And before you know it, you've bloated your operating expense or cost of sales portion of your income statement. Next challenge we see here, outdated and suboptimal contracts. So this one we see show up pretty frequently. In fact, we often try to help negotiate some of these contracts. This is really simple. You signed a contract when you were 2 people for X amount of dollars per license or per service or whatever it might be. And as time goes on, your purchasing power with that vendor, with that company, with that provider has grown, but you have not gone back and renegotiated your contract. And so you've got this anchor legacy contract that you're carrying around with you and don't really even know. And so kind of, I guess, almost a form of cost creep if you really want to think about it that way. Not the best value for your money though. And then third challenge we see, just being reactive around cost management. By the time you notice some of those incremental costs creeping up, it's, sometimes the opportunity cost of not having acted sooner is enormous. And so, really trying to be proactive around cost management. Best way to approach this, especially when you think about your cost of growth. Only addressing financial issues when they become critical, for example. Probably not the best time in the growth cycle to get ahead of those things. You want to make sure you have a good run way to grow as time goes on. So some solutions to those challenges that we recommend. We talked about that matrix. Here's another area where it can be really helpful in understanding the unit economics of growth. And so when you bring on, we talk, personnel is almost always the largest expense on to the business. And so when you think about bringing on new hires, say you want to bring on 10 people in the next year or next month, whatever your growth rate might be, what those salaries are going to be. You probably know the cost of benefits and maybe some taxes and things like that. But the cost of the technology for that person to do their job is a huge cost as well. And so being able to use this matrix to understand what licenses everyone has, what hardware everyone has, we talked about as well, will help you predict some of the ongoing costs and one-time costs associated with every individual you bring on board. Another solution we recommend, put controls and notifications in place. This is a huge one. Get ahead of that cost creep where you can. If you can monitor your spending in real time, there's software out there that will do this. There's some other items we'll talk about here in a minute, but finding ways that you can flag when expenses are starting to grow, maybe your budget's tipping outside of optimal, is going to help you really stay ahead of those costs. One thing that we really enjoy is A lot of the credit cards geared towards startups. You think about like a Divvy or a Brex. There's a ton of these out there now. Have a lot of great features that will help you control costs, put budget limitations in place by category. That becomes really critical, especially when you get to a place when you're not the sole person spending the money. When you bring on people, you have to give them business credit cards. It's a great way to put some controls in place ahead of time to manage the budget. We talked about those contracts, renegotiate them. There's nothing that says you can't renegotiate a contract. You can negotiate just about anything in life. And so why wouldn't you negotiate your contracts every now and then? We have found on behalf of our customers and that our customers themselves have had success with going back to vendors over time and just saying, hey, we've been a really loyal customer. We're spending this amount of money with you. What's the most up-to-date pricing strategy that you have? And you'd be surprised what you can return to the business on that. Sometimes it's, just a better unit price. Sometimes, they give you some other features, trade-offs, et cetera. But it's totally worth going back and doing this with any of your cloud software, for example. Your internet provider is another huge one where we see a lot of gains here. They like to get into these long contracts and you just kind of forget about it. But over time, the cost of delivering those services goes down. And so they'll pass some of that on to you if you ask. And then the final solution we have on this one, automate license management, kind of goes into that, put controls notifications in place, but this is a level up from that. So definitely as your business is maturing, you'll want to think about this. License management is such a huge cost definitely for the customers that we're supporting in the startup world. It's not uncommon now for us to support a company that has 30, 40, 50 different SaaS applications in their environment. And all of those come with the cost, times the total number of headcount you have, times your projected growth rate. You can kind of see where that starts to get a little unwieldy and some sprawl happening. The biggest thing that we see here is people will come to us as new customers and they'll have a bunch of unused licenses because they've just been buying that new and not, turning those off or reassigning them over time. So automating license management, there's software out there that can do this for you. I think some popular ones, there's Tori is a big one we've seen out there. There's some others, but you can Google this. Those are some great options that will help. And it really kind of takes the guesswork out of this. You can sort of set it and put it on autopilot if you set it up properly. So forecasting cost of growth, huge for a new business. You got some capital. You want to make sure you're getting the most return for that capital. Definitely, putting money into costs that don't need to be there, uncontrolled costs, not the best return on your capital. So great way to spend some time and focus and energy. All right, going to turn our attention to productivity drains. So this is a huge one we see in startups as well, especially as they start hitting that growth trajectory. What is a productivity drain? Just like micro losses of time, of energy, of focus, where you're not working on your core mission, you're not being as productive, as high output as you'd like to be as an individual, team, or company. So some challenges we see with that, micro distractions. So as mentioned, these little interruptions, they happen all day to everyone. I see a bird fly by my window and I definitely have that shiny object syndrome. So I'll look out the window. They accumulate over time though. And so they can have a significant impact on your productivity and ultimately your output for your company. Ones we see that often overlap with the IT and technical world, notifications that aren't controlled. You're getting pop-ups that are update this or update that, or turn this on or turn this off. Every time you have to look at that pop-up, read it, click the box, that's a micro distraction. It interrupts you from deep focus on whatever other work you're doing. Technical issues, minor ones. We're not talking about stuff where it's hey, my laptop won't turn on today. Those are obvious ones, and that's something that will get addressed hopefully quickly. We're talking about the small ones that are a nuisance, but not totally stopping your team, preventing your team from doing work, just slowing them down and over time eroding productivity. And so that's going to all lead to some context switching and a slowdown in overall output. They'll break focus. lead to longer recovery times, reduce overall efficiency. Definitely a big problem. I think at this point, most folks are comfortable and familiar with the concept of remote work. I would hope so. Definitely worth addressing still. I think just because everyone's working remotely doesn't mean that everyone's working effectively remotely. And so finding ways to optimize that are always a good use of time and energy. Big examples of this, making sure that your team can collaborate if they're in different locations. Zoom, Slack, Microsoft Teams, these are great tools, but do they know how to use them? Are they using them effectively? Are the tools themselves working properly? Definitely don't want to have frustrated employees, don't want to have compatibility issues, obviously don't want to have slowdowns in work. Similarly, connectivity issues, if you're working from home, you're troubleshooting your own Wi-Fi. I think we've probably all been there at some point. So you're trying to get ahead of some of those challenges that are still creeping up with remote work and the technology that's used to support it. And then last challenge, just an obvious one, as your company grows, your workforce is going to become less technical. So definitely in the tech world, if you're building software or hardware, you're developing websites, whatever it might be, typically your first few employees are going to have a deeply technical skill set, which means some of those micro distractions, some of those remote work technical challenges, they're going to overcome them and probably be less impacted by that. But as the company grows, you have to diversify your skill set. You need to have people come on board that have an entirely different skill set than a deeply technical one, right? You need to have marketing experts and sales experts and HR professionals and finance experts. And so all those other roles will have can have a much larger impact from these micro distractions and technical issues over time. So what are some solutions to those things? Obvious one, use tech that is flexible to your team and locations. We'll go back to slide number one, being the data silos, frustrations and challenges that come along with that, being proactive about selecting the tools and environment that you're operating within. This is another place it's going to show up. So if your environment says I'll use Interlaced as an example, we have a team of employees in San Diego, we have a team of employees in Nashville, we have team members in 18 other states. How do we effectively work together? You have to take that into consideration when you're finding the technology you're going to work with. And so making sure that it's going to work for your team and work for your company in the best way possible. Let's see. And that's like last point, it's going to mean probably a big investment in communication tools. So pay for the extra Zoom license, pay for the extra Slack upgrade. You're going to get enormous benefit from that. Small things. We have a piece of software that we use that integrates with our Slack called Donut. You can check them out. It's a free promo for Donut. But it effectively every Monday prompts two people on the team, a pair of people in multiple pairs. That says, hey, you need to get a virtual coffee date going. So-and-so's in Milwaukee, so-and-so's in San Francisco. It picks a time and place. It sets up a Zoom meeting for you so you can work together. So just small things like that, finding ways to build team camaraderie and collaborate are huge. Maintenance in general, big part of the picture here. We talk about getting ahead of productivity drains, preventing common technical issues. Technology is a part of all of our day-to-day lives. It's a huge part of our work lives in whatever industry we're working in. Technology is imperfect. It breaks, it doesn't work. There are things that go wrong. A good way to get ahead of those things is just to keep up on your maintenance in your software environment, maintenance on your laptops, maintenance in what your office network or even home Wi-Fi network. And there are helpful ways to automate some of that. Oftentimes you can configure that within whatever the technology is itself. Otherwise, there are some third-party options out there that can help kind of put that on autopilot, so to speak. The big thing that we do, again, for our customers is help set that up and really try to head off and mitigate as many of those small technical issues that get compounded over time as possible. Third solution here, and last one, give your team a tech lifeline. Doesn't have to be Interlaced. We do offer this service, but whatever it is, once you get to a certain size and scale, whether that's someone that's doing a different job inside the company today, 10, 15, 20 people, you can definitely get away with like having one of your developers dedicated to doing internal IT some amount of the time. After that, we definitely recommend thinking about hiring somebody or finding a partner that can help your team when these challenges arise, that can, as mentioned, put some of those technical issues aside by kind of helping with a good maintenance program, building the technology more proactively from the jump. Huge help. So in conclusion on that one, if you can get ahead of this stuff, you're building a more resilient work environment, enabling your startup to thrive. Doesn't always seem super obvious these are issues. I can promise you they are. We see them all the time. Our customers are often surprised when we show them, a issue or incident report after the first few months of how frequently their team was reaching out to us on Slack or on Zoom to ask for help because they were just getting slowed down in their day-to-day. When otherwise, without that lifeline, they would not have raised their hand and asked for help. All right, and then final common challenge we see. There's lots of meat on this bone, so we'll try to keep it direct. Is cybersecurity. I think everybody at this point recognizes the importance of cybersecurity. If you spend any time on LinkedIn, you're going to get hit with something around cybersecurity at some point. So obvious concern, obvious challenge. Commonly, the way we see this show up for startups, it's difficult to safeguard your assets being really your data, any of the information that you're warehousing. It can be your intellectual property. It could be things that are proprietary to your business that are, the value of your business, of your startup. But it can be other things like your customer information, for example. And so being really effective in keeping all those things safe and secure, huge challenge for startups, especially as time goes on. We see data sprawl and things like that. We talked about this a little bit, but we're going to rehash it here. How do you design a security program that's going to keep all of your data and your assets and that intellectual property we talked about secure, while at the same time not being prohibitive to your team getting their work done, not slowing you down, not being a barrier for everyone hitting their mission? Implementing stringent security measures definitely can be a hinder to productivity. So you have to be really thoughtful about the way you approach it. It can really be frustrating for your employees as well. If you flip a switch one day and it's really hard for them to log in or really hard for them to find some information, or if they have to get 2 or 3 approvals to get someplace. So you definitely want to find what the middle ground is and the balancing that robust security system and still trying to maintain a seamless experience for your employees and your team. And then last one we see as a challenge for the startups we serve, planning for future compliance needs. Not everyone has compliance needs. Many don't have compliance needs right now. So whatever stage you're at in your business life cycle, you may not have this on your roadmap yet. Encourage you to start thinking about it, start considering it. It's not uncommon for us now to see companies that are getting requests from their customers, getting requests from their insurance providers, to meet some of these different compliance frameworks that are out there. If you're in software, SOC 2 is a big player there, high trust. If you're in the healthcare or med tech space, obviously HIPAA considerations come into play, government supply chain. If you're working with government contractors or doing work with government yourself, NIST or CMMC, lots of acronyms there to go look up if you don't know what they are. Just know that they are out there, and there's a good chance that whatever vertical you're serving, your customers will expect that you have some type of compliance and security measures in place. And failing to do so early can be extremely costly later on, not just in the I guess audit process as you're trying to get compliant, but also think about the costs that could come along with any kind of security incident, legal costs, financial penalties, etc. So some solutions to some of these security issues and challenges that we recommend. A really easy one now: implement multi-factor authentication everywhere. Multi-factor authentication just means that you're logging in with a username, a password, most often some kind of token or one-time code. You probably have all logged into your bank and have been prompted for this. Text you a code, or you have some kind of application that gives you a code to put in. We call that what you have and what you know. And so even in the event that there is a data breach and your passwords and your usernames are compromised, there's another layer of protection there, because that bad actor will not have that token or that code to be able to log in to any of these systems where you might have some sensitive information. Great news on this one also. The industry has really taken cybersecurity seriously recently. Definitely all the SaaS providers out there. So if you are building your infrastructure in the cloud, which you should be doing, if we go back to the last slide about remote work and remote teams, cloud technology, if you are doing that already, then you're going to be able to turn on multi-factor authentication for most, if not all, of the apps you're using. And it really, really does go a long way in reducing the risk to your business. Along that same line, you might consider a single sign-on solution. There are many popular solutions out there. I believe Okta is still probably the most prominent solution. Google has a solution that they offer themselves. So does Microsoft. So if you've chosen one of those productivity suites from slide one, then you've already got options here built in for your company. This, when we talked about really striking the balance between kind of rigorous security and that seamless experience for your employees, single sign-on is a great way to unlock that option for yourself. It allows you to get all the benefit of multi-factor authentication without all the headache of having to go through that process of log in, remember the password, get the code every time you want to get into an app. So effectively what it does is you do that one time into the single sign-on solution, and then you can use that to log into all of your other apps and anywhere else that your data is being stored. So really streamlines that user process by really streamlining the login process, and helps at the same time comply with some security protocols. All right, third solution to consider. This is a big one. So we talked about putting your data in the cloud. We talked about using SaaS, so web apps and things like that. Inevitably, your data is going to make its way out of the cloud and onto your employees' computers, their laptops, etc. It's just part of the deal. You get to download information in an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc, whatever it might be, and work with it offline. Just happens. A great way to keep that secure is through encryption. And so you can encrypt your devices, whether they're MacBooks or Windows laptops. It basically takes all the data and makes it indecipherable unless you have the decryption key. And you can actually do that and enforce that through device management. So there's some software that you can buy and put on your different laptops to help encrypt them, and then also kind of keep them more generally secure. Again, something we help our customers with by default when they come on board. Not super difficult to do, but definitely really, really helpful and impactful. Another great benefit of having that management on the device: they have a tendency to get lost, they walk off, they get stolen. If that happens, you can have peace of mind no matter what information was living on it, because if you have the device managed, you can actually send some commands remotely to have it shut down, wipe all the data, effectively erase its fingerprint, so you don't have any security concerns that way. And then as we think about compliance, I kind of mentioned already, but think ahead. So, again, it may not seem like it's something that is relevant to your business today. It may never become relevant to your business. That would be, I think, the exception. As time goes on, we definitely see this becoming a part of every business's life cycle. There's different acronyms I threw out there earlier. think about what you're doing, what product you're delivering, what service you're delivering. Think about who you're delivering to, who your customers and constituents are. And that will really help you think about what you need to do now to start building some of those best practices around compliance. And even if you never go and get quote unquote compliant, you at least have the peace of mind that you put some good security protocols in place and you've got good security hygiene in your business, that you're not going to devalue your asset with a data breach or some other security event. So those are the solutions. That wraps up. We talked about 5 different challenges. Hopefully we gave you some actionable solutions. Here's a small checklist. We're going to, as Mallory mentioned, give everyone the deck as a leave behind. We also have a longer ebook that I think we're going to distribute for folks that have some other checklist items in there. And with that, I think we'll open the floor for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So we have just a few. So based on the startup industries that Interlaced has worked with in the past, do you have any guidance or additional color that you can give about which productivity suites are best for specific verticals?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think they have a lot in common. So the 2 most common ones are obviously Google and Microsoft. Zoom actually now has like their own version that they're, I think, pretty rapidly maturing, with not just Zoom video anymore, but now email and chat and calendars. So there are like other options out there if you want to get outside the box. Google or Microsoft are a safe bet, especially when you think about being able to collaborate with external customers or integrate other tools or software. I think for the startup world, Google seems to be the preferred choice. Oftentimes, it's easier to get started on Google. People coming into the startup world are already familiar using Google, either for at home or a previous job. We definitely see, like, as time goes on, if you're in a more regulated industry, like say, you're serving healthcare, you're doing med tech, something like that, fintech, Microsoft seems to have a little bit of a leg up on overall configurability and kind of some security features. But you really can't go wrong with either one.
Great. What guidance do you have around vendor access? So I know a lot of times as companies and teams are scaling, it's really easy to kind of have, part-time contractors. So do you have any guidance that you can give about how to especially when it comes to the user permissions matrix, how to incorporate vendors into that?
Yeah, definitely. And we do this often for our customers. It's so common now that you have some form of contractors working with your business. And so definitely something to think about as you're navigating all the other challenges we talked about. With whether they're a contractor or they're a full-time employee, the least level of access is probably the best level of access. So I kind of said it earlier in the way I said it was, exactly what they need, no more, no less. And so I would approach that with your contractors the same way, just as they were a full-time employee. Think about exactly what they need to do their job effectively and find a way to give them exactly that and no more and no less.
Awesome. One last question here. This kind of goes back to the slide you were talking about with cost creep and things of that nature. Is there a number or a head count where it makes sense for companies to go back and start negotiating costs? Like, I think it's in our minds, we all think, like, do you have to be at 200? Is that when you start to go back and can renegotiate those costs, or just any kind of level or guidance you have around that?
Yeah, totally. Well, I'll start with it never hurts to ask. And so when you sign up for the contract, a great time to ask, right? Initially. Oftentimes, especially when we're talking about like software contracts, or even like, I think another example I gave was internet contracts, which can be impactful if you have multiple locations. They'll publish their most current pricing a lot of times, and you can assume that you can achieve some kind of discount beyond that. So, and usually those prices come with some kind of, there's price breaks at certain headcount. So they might say 0 to 10 users is X dollars, up to 50 users, X dollars, 100, 50 plus users, X dollars. So you can kind of get a good read on like what might be an option out there. And then, like I said, never hurts to ask. So, if you want to just put yourself on a cadence, the way that we like to do it here is like every 6 months or so, I get with our CFO, Anna. We look at like our biggest spend items. We think about, if that spend is working well for us, like we're getting good value out of that product or service. And then oftentimes we'll reapproach and just say, hey, here's where we're going over the next 6 months. Can you work with us to get there? We're going to grow X%, whatever it might be.
Thank you. That was super helpful. Those are all the questions that we had. Thank you all for joining today. We really appreciate it. We would love for you to connect with our team on LinkedIn. Here we've got Jeff's LinkedIn profile where you can go and connect with him. I also dropped those into the chat so if that's a little bit easier for everyone. But again, thank you all. We will make sure to get out this recording to you and and a couple of other follow-ups. And please be sure to register for our next webinar on August 14th. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.